Imagine seeing yourself on the street, not just someone who looks like you, but your exact double, dressed the same way, with the same walk. The instinctive reaction is not curiosity, but a chilling terror. The poet Johann Goethe described once seeing himself riding toward him on horseback, wearing clothes he would only put on 8 years later. This sense of irrational recognition is the essence of the phenomenon. Because deep within humanity's collective memory lies the knowledge that meeting your doppelganger is the worst of omens. It is the beginning of the end. This is a story about the most ancient fear, the fear of losing not your life, but yourself. The word doppelganger comes from German and literally means double-goer. The term was first introduced into literature by the German Romantic writer Jean-Paul in his 1796 novel Siebenkäse, cementing it in the culture forever. This is not just a physical copy. In mythology, it is a ghostly, often sinister, double of a living person. Unlike a twin, it has no blood relation. Its appearance is irrational and always carries a hidden threat. It either foretells imminent doom or seeks to take the original's place, deceiving everyone around them. But why is this idea so universal? From ancient Egyptian beliefs to modern urban legends, the myth of the evil twin exists in dozens of cultures, separated by thousands of miles and centuries. For example, Finnish folklore has the concept of the etiäinen, a harbinger spirit that appears where a person is about to go, creating confusion and anxiety. What makes us so terrified of our own copy? To find the answer, we must journey into the past, to the very origins of this primal horror. One of the oldest prototypes of the double was the Egyptian concept of the Ka. It was not a soul, but rather a life force, a spiritual double that lived in parallel with a person and met them in the afterlife. Tomb paintings often show a pharaoh in the company of his Ka, which looks like his exact copy with the hieroglyph of 2 raised arms above its head. Although the Ka was not inherently evil, the very idea of a disembodied copy that must reunite with the soul after death laid the foundation for future myths. To encounter one's Ka during life was considered impossible and extremely dangerous. In Norse mythology, we find the Vardøger, a ghostly double that precedes a person, performing their actions in advance. Imagine hearing a family member unlock the door, stomp their feet while taking off their shoes. But when you go to the hallway, no one is there. A few minutes later, the real person arrives and repeats the exact same actions. That is the Vardøger. It is not an evil spirit, but rather an anomaly in time, hinting at the fragility of reality and the predestination of fate. In Irish and Scottish folklore, the double is called a fetch, and its role is unambiguously sinister. The superstition was very specific. Seeing your fetch in the morning foretold a long life. But if it appeared to you in the evening or at night, it was a sure sign of imminent death. This belief was so powerful that it often became a self-fulfilling prophecy. A person convinced they had seen their double would lose the will to live and soon die. Here, the double is no longer just a shadow, but an active agent of fate. In Slavic mythology, the fear of the double manifested through stories of evil spirits capable of taking human form. A leshy could lead you astray in the woods by appearing as an acquaintance, while a demon could pretend to be a husband or wife. Particularly terrifying were tales of changelings, where a demonic creature would kidnap a human child, leaving its exact but soulless copy in its place. Folklore even had ways to test a child. It was believed a changeling would betray itself if it saw something absurd, like a woman brewing beer in an eggshell. Despite cultural differences, all these myths share one thing. The double is a fundamental threat. It is like discovering that someone has perfectly forged your signature. Even if they haven't used it for malicious purposes, the very act of forgery devalues the original. It calls your uniqueness into question. If an exact copy of you exists, which one is real? This existential anxiety, the fear of being replaced and forgotten, is the core of the doppelganger phenomenon. It would seem that the 18th century, with its cult of science and rationalism, should have destroyed superstitions about doubles. But that did not happen. The phenomenon simply relocated. From village folklore, it moved into the studies of romantic writers like E.T.A. Hoffmann, who made duality a central theme of their work. The double became a powerful tool for exploring the dark corners of the human soul. A classic example of this new approach is Edgar Allan Poe's story, William Wilson. The protagonist is haunted from childhood by his double, who shares his name and features but acts as his moral compass, his conscience. In the finale, the hero kills his double, only to realize he has killed the best part of himself. As he dies, the double whispers, "Henceforth art thou also dead to the world. In me didst thou exist, and in my death, see by this image, which is thine own, how utterly thou hast murdered thyself." Here, the double is an internal conflict made visible. In his novella, The Double, Fyodor Dostoevsky takes this fear to a new social level. In the dreary, bureaucratic St. Petersburg, the double of the titular counselor Golyadkin is not a mystical terror but a social nightmare. He is a more successful, brazen, and assertive version of himself who, step by step, steals his reputation, friends, and place in society, driving the original to complete madness. This is no longer about mysticism, but the tragedy of a little man crushed by his own ambitions and fear of becoming obsolete. Thus, literature transformed the doppelganger from a simple harbinger of death into a complex metaphor. It was a shift from an external threat to a civil war within a single personality. It came to personify split personalities, repressed desires, conscience, or, conversely, the dark side we hide from society. It ceased to be just an external enemy and became the enemy within. But what if doppelgangers are not just folklore and literary metaphors? History has preserved several mysterious and well-documented cases that make one question the boundaries of possibility. These accounts do not prove the supernatural, but they show how deeply the belief in doubles was ingrained even in the minds of educated people. One of the most famous stories occurred in 1845. A French teacher named Émilie Séguier had a double who was regularly seen by her students. It would appear next to her during lessons, mimicking her movements, or sit in an empty chair while Émilie herself was working in the garden. This case, documented by Robert Dale Owen, is unique because the double was seen by dozens of witnesses simultaneously. In the most famous incident, as it sat in the teacher's chair, two students approached and tried to touch it, feeling a strange resistance, like touching fabric. Émilie herself never saw her copy, but felt a terrible fatigue whenever it appeared. The famous French writer Guy de Maupassant claimed that in the final years of his life, he was regularly visited by his double. This experience became the basis for his chilling story, The Horla. The double did not just appear, it would sit across from him and dictate plots. Maupassant described these encounters as completely real, but agonizing. Today, many believe this was a symptom of his advancing syphilis, but for the writer, it was an undeniable fact that foretold his imminent demise. Legend has it that shortly before her death in 1603, Queen Elizabeth II saw a double of herself in her bedroom, lying on her bed. The figure was pale and gaunt. For such a pragmatic ruler, who had reigned with an iron fist for nearly 45 years, this encounter was a devastating blow. The queen took it as an undeniable sign of her approaching death, which she reported to her courtiers. She died soon after. A similar incident was described by Abraham Lincoln. He recounted how, after his election as president in 1860, he saw a double reflection of himself in a mirror. One face was alive, while the second was deathly pale. His wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, interpreted it to mean he would be elected to a second term, but would not survive it. And so it came to pass. This case shows how the doppelganger phenomenon weaves itself into the fabric of fate and history. Hallucinations? Mass psychosis? Or something more? These stories act like a virus in the source code of reality. They don't disprove it entirely, but they introduce a glitch that makes you question the whole system. Situated at the intersection of fact and fiction, they offer no answers but perfectly illustrate why the fear of the double is so potent. It invades reality, violating all known laws of physics and logic, leaving only unsettling questions in its wake. Leaving mysticism behind, let us turn to science. Can our own brains create doubles? Here we move from folklore to the fields of neurology and psychiatry, which offer their own, no less astonishing, explanations. Modern psychology proposes several theories that, while not explaining every case, shed light on the nature of this phenomenon. A rare medical condition called hautoscopy exists. It is a complex hallucination in which a person sees their own double. In his experiments, Swiss neurologist Olaf Blanke was able to artificially induce the sensation of a ghost behind the back in patients by stimulating a specific brain region, the temporoparietal junction. Patients described feeling as if their consciousness was split between two bodies. This proves that the experience of meeting a double can be generated entirely inside our skulls. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung offered one of the most profound interpretations. He believed the double is a manifestation of the shadow archetype, the part of our personality that we repress and refuse to acknowledge. For Jung, the shadow is not just evil. It is a source of untapped creative energy, suppressed instincts, and strength. Therefore, from his perspective, the goal is not to kill your double, as in Poe's story, but to integrate it, to acknowledge and accept your dark side to become a whole individual. Meeting a doppelganger is a symbolic and frightening encounter with your own dark self. On a more fundamental level, the fear of the double is the fear of losing one's identity. Our sense of self is the most precious thing we have. If you imagine your personality as a work with a unique copyright, the doppelganger is a perfect pirated copy that devalues the original. The idea that someone else can be exactly like you challenges your uniqueness. If there is a second you, which one is real? Who has the right to your life, your memories, your love? So why is this idea universal? Because it touches upon the fundamental pillars of the human psyche, the fear of death, when the double is a harbinger, the fear of madness, when it symbolizes a split personality, and most importantly, the fear of losing oneself. In essence, the doppelganger is the ultimate expression of the uncanny valley effect, where an object that looks almost human, but not quite, provokes revulsion. Only in this case, that object is you. The double is a perfect mirror for our deepest existential anxieties. In the 21st century, we no longer need to peer into dark corners to meet a double. Technology has created the perfect habitat for it, the global network, where copying and simulation are basic principles. The ancient fear has not disappeared, it has simply mutated and gone digital. Our social media profiles are our first digital doppelgangers. We create idealized versions of ourselves, more successful, attractive, and happy. This digital double begins to live its own life, traveling and having fun while we are stuck in traffic or sick. An unsettling gap emerges between the real self and its glossy copy. And the fear of having an account hacked is the modern version of the horror that a double will steal our life and speak in our name. Deepfake technology takes this fear to a new level. It is essentially the digital changeling of Slavic folklore, but instead of a child, it can replace anyone. It is now possible to create not just a static copy, but a living, speaking double that is nearly indistinguishable from the original. The ancient myth of an evil twin deceiving loved ones is becoming a frighteningly real technological threat. The development of artificial intelligence poses an even more complex question. Will we one day be able to create a complete digital copy of our consciousness? This new double would possess our memories and thoughts. Would it be a form of immortality or the creation of a soulless imitator? The ancient fear of being replaced returns, but now in the context of the future of all humanity. We have traced the path of the doppelganger, from a mythical harbinger of death in ancient cultures, to a literary metaphor for internal conflict in the works of Poe and Dostoevsky. We have seen how it manifested in mysterious historical accounts, and how science attempts to explain it through brain malfunctions and subconscious archetypes. Like a chameleon, it has changed its form. It was a ghost, then a psychological symptom, and today it lives in the digital world as our avatar and a potential deepfake threat. The phenomenon of the double has proven incredibly resilient because it is the perfect antagonist. It is the ultimate internal threat. It doesn't need to hack the system because it already has all the keys. It knows all our weaknesses because it is us. It threatens not our body, but our very essence, our right to call ourselves I. It is the embodiment of doubt in our own authenticity. Ultimately, the story of the doppelganger is the story of the human fear of looking in the mirror and not recognizing ourselves. Or even more terrifying, recognizing all too well that dark part we try so hard to hide. This brings us back to the choice Carl Jung proposed, to fight the shadow or to integrate it. If you ever meet your double, what will you see? A harbinger of death, or the part of yourself you were afraid to acknowledge? The answer to that question may be the key to understanding who we truly are.